Welcome to Module 7. In this module, we'll cover the DS2 connectivity. Since the docking stations have no usable memory, all information collected from the instrument must be sent to a storage device, and this would be such as a server or PC. In order for the server or PC to receive this information, an Internet protocol, otherwise known as an IP address, must be assigned. Without the proper addressing and server connections, the DS2 will not be able to communicate with the instrument, rendering the DS2 unusable. So let's do a real quick overview of your docking station system. First off, you have your instrument docking stations, and this is what is communicating with your individual instruments. Now all that information is then transferred down the line to your DSS, which is your docking station server. Now of course you also have your DSAC, which is your docking station server admin console for viewing all your records, and we've covered this in depthly in module number 4. And now for communication between your IDSs and your docking station server, they must have an IP address. So let's do a real quick walk around the back of your DS2. Now you have your 3 gas inlet ports for connection with your calibration gas cylinders, and right beneath that is your gas reader connections. And for technicians, we have a 9-pin serial connection. There's also a 12-volt power supply connection, and for docking stations arranged in a cluster, we have Cal Gas cluster connections. Also an Ethernet port for communicating back to your centralized server or PC, and a wall power supply connection. So let's look at the docking station when it's hooked up to the calibration gas cylinder. And at the top of your cylinder you have a demand flow regulator, and a demand flow regulator will allow gas to be delivered to your DS2 at the same rate at which the DS2 pulls the gas. You also have, of course, your calibration gas cylinder, and every calibration cylinder has an iGas card. Encoded on the card is the expiration date of the cylinder, the lot number of the cylinder, and the gas concentrations inside that cylinder. And if utilized, you have an iGas reader. The card slides into the reader, and the reader automatically reads the encoded information on the card and delivers that back to your DS2. If using the calibration gas cylinder with a demand flow regulator with a pressure switch connected, you do have your demand flow regulator at the top. And connected to that demand flow regulator is your pressure switch. Now the pressure switch is going to read the pressure inside the cylinder and transmit that back to your DS2. And we have to ensure that the pressure switch is connected into the iGas reader. And we have our iGas card that is plugged into our iGas reader, and of course the iGas reader will read the encoded information off the card and deliver that also back to your docking station. And of course your calibration gas cylinder. So let's look at the back of your DS2 and look at your 3 calibration gas inlet ports. Port number 1 is normally reserved for fresh air. Therefore, typically, this port number 1 will also have a filter to prevent unwanted matter from being ingested into the DS2. Inlet port number 2 could be a calibration gas connection, as well as port number 3. And in this example, we see that port number 3 is not being utilized. So let's look at also your iGas connections. iGas connection 1, located right underneath your port 1. iGas connection number 2, right underneath port 2. And underneath port number 3, you have your iGas connection number 3. So in this example, you'll see that we only have one iGas port being utilized because we only have one calibration gas cylinder being used. So let's look at an example of changing out a cylinder. If that must be done, the first thing we have to do is unsnap the iGas reader from the card. And then we need to unplug the tubing from the demand flow regulator. From there, we just simply unthread the regulator from the cylinder. And then the new cylinder will then be reattached to your demand flow regulator. Now once that is secure, we're just going to do everything back in reverse. So we're going to slide the card into the iGas reader till it clicks. Then we're going to plug the tubing back into the demand flow regulator. And now our cylinder has been successfully changed out. So now let's look at changing out a cylinder if it has the pressure switch installed. First thing we're going to do is unplug the pressure switch, then unplug the iGas reader from the iGas card. We will then unthread the cylinder from the demand flow regulator. Once that's been removed, we can now take our new cylinder, thread it into place. Once that's threaded into place, we're going to do everything back in reverse. So we're going to take our iGas reader, plug our iGas card into the reader until it clicks, and then plug our pressure switch into the iGas reader itself. And now the cylinder has been successfully changed out. To maximize calibration gas savings, or if an additional calibration gas ports are needed, the docking station can be set into what's called a cluster. Now in a cluster, the docking stations can share calibration gas cylinders, thus eliminating the need for each DS2 to have its own cylinder. A maximum of 5 docking stations can be set into a cluster. So let's look at an example of clustering 2 DS2s together. The first thing we have to do when clustering 2 DS2s together is with the provided tubing, we need to connect it to the Cal Gas to from ports on the back of each of your docking stations. In this example, you'll see that on the far left we have the gas out from the top going to the gas in on the bottom. Although your docking stations are clustered together with the calibration gas, they still need to have their own individual Ethernet connection back to either the PC or the server. Now, to allow for multiple docking stations the ability to transmit information over one network drop, they will need to be connected to something known as a switch. Now we looked at the mechanical connections between your DS2 and your server. Now let's look at the software connections. Establishing DS2 connectivity with the server can be accomplished in one of 2 ways. You could use DS2 Broadcaster, and this is a service that runs on your DSS server, and what it'll do is automatically broadcast out the IP address of the DSS server, and this will then can be received by your IDS or DSAC on the network. Now for those who are uncomfortable with having DS2 Broadcaster broadcasting out over their open network, they can then use something called Configurator in its place. Through Configurator software, the user can manually type in both the server IP address and the docking station IP address. So let's look at activating DS2 Broadcaster first. We do that by first clicking on Start. And then we click on Settings and then Control Panel. From there we click on Administrative Tools. We then select Services at the bottom. And then we click on DS2 Broadcaster. Under the status type, we're going to select Automatic, so it'll automatically be broadcasting out the server IP address. We click on Apply. And then to start the operation, we have to click Start to activate DS2 Broadcaster. But let's look at our second option, which is using Configurator. To use Configurator, the first thing you have to do is click on Start. From Start, we're going to select Industrial Scientific Corporation, and then we'll be able to locate our docking station configurator software if it has been so installed. From this screen, the user can assign both the DS2 and the server IP addresses. Once both have been established, communication should occur. So the first thing we'll do is type in the DS2 IP address found on the DS2 display itself. So with a valid IP address, this address can be entered into the configurator. If the IP address, though, is 127.0.0.1, this would indicate a communication error, and therefore we have to now find a valid IP address. Now, to obtain a valid DS2 IP address, I'm going to use the keypad on the front of my DS2, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to force a diagnostics test on the DS2 itself, and I'm going to do this by first pressing my enter. After I press my enter, I'm going to use my right arrow to highlight Diagnose. Once I have Diagnose highlighted, I'm going to press the enter to start that process. After completing the process, a valid IP address will be made available to the user. So with a valid IP address now available, this address can be entered into the configurator. But now I have to type in the server IP address, which can be found on an already communicating DS2 display. But if I don't have another DS2 display to read the IP address off of, I can follow these steps to obtain a valid IP address from the server. The first thing I'm going to do is select Run. And then under my Open, I'm going to type in CMD. Click OK to accept that. And now, from here, I can type in ipconfig and press enter. At this point, I could take note of the IP address for the input into the configurator. And once I have typed in the docking station IP address and the server IP address, I press the send to broadcast the IP addresses to the DS2.